Hallo, ich bin der Jonas.
Hello, I am Jonas.
Hi, ich bin der Christian.
And hi, I'm Christian.
Ich bin 18 Jahre
I'm
alt.
18 years old.
36.
I'm 36 years old.
Und wir haben etwas mit Schlaf zu
And
tun.
we are involved with the charge syndrome.
Wir mal nicht zusammen kochen.
But this afternoon we don't want to cook together, but we want to properly initiate the charge conference, right, Jonas? Yes. Who's next? Jonas, I think this afternoon
Heute ist der Tim dran.
it's Tim's turn.
Welches Thema?
Oh, right, which is his topic?
Ich glaube,
I think it is.
den Thema.
The topic is, and Christian says, who's in charge?
Der Betroffene, oder?
And the German subtitle says, not just the one affected is affected.
Was sollst du lesen?
Also, nein, betroffen ist nicht nur der Betroffene.
Reading again the German
Das
subtitle.
ist das Thema.
I think that's the topic, don't you think, Jonas?
Genau.
Yes, right, says Jonas.
Nur der
Affected is not just the affected person, correct.
Ja, dann wünschen wir dem Tim mal viel
Christian,
Erfolg.
okay, then let's wish Tim best of success, right? Yes, says Jonas. And all of you enjoy listening.
Genau.
Also, oh,
Yay.
gut.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Jonas and Christian, for that introduction. I love the fact that we have people who have charge syndrome do introductions here. I think it's a brilliant model, and it means a lot to me that they want to talk about me. We have a little bit of time together, and I hope I leave some time for questions or reactions. I don't always, because I get excited and I elaborate and talk on and on. You also notice that many of my colleagues in the front row have left. They think they know what I'm going to say. What I'm going to say is, thanks a lot for leaving. Actually, they have a consultation upstairs, so they've gone to take care of that. So, again, I'm so pleased to be here. This is one of my favorite conferences, if not my favorite conference, because it's so well organized. There's so much passion. There's so many interesting people to listen to, and so many of you to try to get to know. And I realize there's a bit of a language barrier sometimes, but we try, and we make it work. And Kids with Charge are Kids with Charge everywhere. So thanks for having me. So Claudia had a little bit of difficulty with my title, Who's in Charge? The idea behind it is, who is the person who's in charge? That's a title that I came up with independently in 1994, but Kim came up with it independently much earlier. It's probably because she's much older than I am. But okay, rhetorical question. In charge land, who should be in charge? The professionals? No, it's the parents. You are in charge, whether you like it or not. And I can remember when my son Jacob, who's now 33, when he was born, we kept waiting for someone to come to the home and take charge. They never showed up. They didn't exist. And Nancy and I had to look at each other and say, guess what? It's up to us. And that might work if the rest of the world would allow us to make the decisions to be in charge. Because we have too many professionals, medical professionals, educational professionals, who think they're in charge and they know what's best. But guess what? They don't. And the best professionals, medical professionals, educational professionals, team up with us, collaborate with us to make the very best decisions we can for our child, but it's still our child. So that's what the title is all about. I've got 2 different computers. One's in English and one's in German. So remember to move both of them forward. There it is. So, words of a teacher. After having taken Andy home for a night, I'll never yell at a parent for leaving something out of a diaper bag, being 15 minutes late for an appointment, or any other minor thing. So we were supposed to go to our very first meeting with the schools, and we didn't show up. And I can just imagine what they were saying. Another one of those families, they just don't do what they're supposed to do. There's no follow through, et cetera, et cetera. You know why we didn't show up? We forgot. You know, we were busy trying to deal with all Jacob's needs and keep Jacob alive and everything moving forward. We just forgot. I'm sorry, apologize. But remember, as parents, we have so much going on that being annoyed with us for forgetting or for not bringing something along or not having made the right appointment, come on, we have so much going on in our lives. So think about the world of disabilities. So what's the difference in the world of disabilities versus the other world that other people seem to be able to live in? Well, leading to a felt minus, that just means that to a certain extent we feel less than sometimes other families. Have you noticed that sometimes other families, they don't want to hang out with you anymore, or people look at you oddly, those kinds of things like, how do I feel like we're a normal, regular family when we have this disability looming over us? And then how does it affect your work as parents? Limitations to the kind of job you can have because of time and resources. I mean, if the school calls and says, your son has soiled himself and spread feces all over his face, you need to come. Do you say to your boss, hey, gotta go? But sometimes also work is an escape. I know I would go to work and work very hard all day, and then 5 o'clock would come and I would think, now I have to go to my other job, right? Taking care of Jacob. And didn't always look forward to that. Think about friendship and where do you get your social support from? Well, why do we come to conferences? Because I get my social support from people at the conferences because they know what I experience. And if my son is spinning around on the floor, people go, oh, cute. That doesn't happen other places when he's spinning around on the floor. But there's a change, isn't there, in terms of the friendships? Because it used to be, you had a group of friends, and we still are friends with some of those people, but it's different because, they will come to our house, but they've never invited us to their house with our son. I don't think they can handle his presence there. So how much do you want to spend time with them? But you know who our best friends are right now? There's a family 5-10 minutes away who has a child with charge. They're our best friends. And then the love relationship, the relationship between parents, which is a very difficult thing. During this time of adjusting to have a child with disabilities, not everybody makes it. Because of the expectations. This is not what I expected to have in my life. I was a school psychologist, right? I cared about people with disabilities, other people's children, right? Not my child, right? So it changes everything. It's not what I thought I was going to moving into in my life. I'm really glad it happened. I wouldn't be in Germany staying at a castle if it hadn't been for Jacob. So this is really pretty wonderful. But also then the commitment, because couples figure out how to balance what needs to be done within a family, and a lot of it gets shared. With disability, it's much harder to share everything. It seems to me we kind of major in certain kinds of stuff. Like for me, it was the daily care for Jacob, which I was better at doing only because I would remember to do it on the schedule that he needed. But when it comes to medical visits or dealing with the school people, Nancy is so far superior at those kinds of things. I mean, if I had to take him to the doctor and I come home and she said, what did the doctor say about, I think the doctor said, well, why did they prescribe that medication? Don't you know he can't have that particular antibiotic? Oh, no, I didn't. Right? I'm really bad. And did you ask? No, yeah. So it changes. The world of disabilities is just a little bit different. Doesn't make it bad. But think about some of the parent experiences. One is, anybody ever feel a little bit of guilt from time to time? How do we develop that courage to be imperfect? You know, I look out here at all of you, and a bunch of imperfect people. I know that already. Right? And the guy standing in front of you is as imperfect as anybody I know. But do we have the courage to go ahead and deal with life despite our imperfections, despite our uncertainties, despite the handicaps that we personally experience with that? So here's what one parent said. How do you know if you have the right doctors and therapists doing the right things and enough of them? How do you know if you're doing all the right things and enough of them? I've been avoiding phone calls and insurance stuff, etc., because I just want us to be normal. Well, it's not going to happen, but we never know. Those questions are always there. I'm sorry. I progressed really, really well. No, I can do it, thank you. But you might have to yell at me. So there's the quote. But we may want us to be normal. It isn't going to get there. All right. The need to defend the child. Our first battle was over getting deafblind consultative services. Why wouldn't they do that? The schools are afraid of having to spend more money to get somebody who knows something about deafblindness. Even though in the States that consultation is free, they still don't want to do it. We fought and fought. Now we're going through it again. Maybe it's just a looming battle, but I feel like weeping. Yes, it can be necessary to fight like the devil, but that doesn't make it right. Capability of the child. And the shorter girl there is the one that we're talking about here. When she was an infant, the hospital sent out evaluators. They sat me down and told me she would never walk, talk, or be independent. Have you heard that? After he left, I cried, and as his terror, my world spun. Then I thought, baloney. She ended up learning lots. Her performance always goes above and beyond potential, always. And she lives independently. She's got a job with computers. She does very well with her life. But she was never supposed to do anything because evaluators don't understand charge. They don't understand that things change. Every child develops. Every child goes through stages. Some of us are slower at those stages, but we get there. Can I cope? Tonight, I'm so very tired of being the person figuring out what's going on. It's been a while since I felt so isolated, scared, on and on. Right now, it's as though nothing is enough to really help. I'm damned tired of this. I would like some help too. I need it now. My daughter needs it now. I think we all have those moments when it just seems too overwhelming. And how do we figure out how to pick ourselves back up and plow ahead anyway? Because if we don't, our child will lose. Our child depends on us. But it sure would be nice to know that there are actually, but people out there who will stand up and say, hey, I'm with you. You know, we can figure this out. Look familiar? I didn't know how many openings there were in a child's body that they could attach tubes to. It just seemed to go on and on and on. And yeah, we were really wired up when Jacob was born. And they told us, hold his hand and get a music box and play music for him. Well, he's completely deaf, so that probably didn't help him very much. Although I did it. I wound that music box over and over again. And I held his hand, even though he was probably tactilely defensive and hated the fact that someone was holding his hand. I did it because I was told to do it. But, you know, that shock of, we had no idea. You know, Jacob was born early. but still had no idea. And bit by bit, they would say, well, notice there's an extra fold of skin between his eyes. And his ears are a little weird. And so things kept coming out. We're concerned about his heart. Oh my gosh. And then when it was, he's got no nasal passages, that was, for me, that was the last straw. What? No nasal passages? I can't handle this. And then, of course, the concern of whether your baby will live or not. Yeah, and I know we didn't talk about that. I didn't want to even think about that. But it was always there in the back of your mind. And then, what's wrong? You know, and it took several months before we got a suggestion of a diagnosis, and it was even more months before we got the diagnosis. But who's it fall on? Whose responsibility is it to keep this baby alive? It's not the doctors. It's not the nurses. Turns out it's us. So the first 4 years, the medical years, staying alive. Heart surgery for many people, the choanal repair, cleft lip repair, or whole clefting repair, worrying about aspiration pneumonia, as his swallow was so poor, ear infection after ear infection after ear infection. And we know after the first 4 years, many of those medical issues are taken care of. And we think now life is going to be sweet, so much better. And then guess what? Now there's the first 4 years, yeah. You didn't stand up. Then guess what? We have school. Well, this is still the surgeries. My son is 5, is about to have his 44th surgery. I would like him to go to school someday, but right now he is sick too often, and they really don't have a program for him. So it's pretty much me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All I do is take care of him. That's a lot. 44 is a lot of surgeries. I don't think Jacob's halfway to that, but he might be halfway to that. Yeah. And we think going to school would solve all the problems. So the start of school, your child does not belong here. We had a parent say, what's your child going to do, just roll around on the floor all day? I thought, well, at least he'd be at school. Or we don't provide those services. You know, he's got these issues. He needs to be fed by a tube. We don't do that here, right? Or, you know, we know what's best for your child. Listen to the experts. Your child should go into the most restrictive program possible, away from everybody else, or whatever they think, right? And we're told to lower our expectations for him, right? So you're thinking too high for what he might be able to do. Lower those expectations, you'll be happier, because you won't have the frustration of his not meeting the things that you would like to do. You guys are just living in some land where you think everything's going to be all right. This guy's severely impaired. Yeah, grow up, listen to it, accept it. Thanks, school. An adolescent with charge is confronted by many issues. By the way, the second edition of our book, Charge Syndrome, Kim is our latest editor of the book, so it's Kim and Meg Hefner and myself. This is from that book. But the boy there, Nolan, is the son of our best friends back home. But all the things you have to do as your child gets into adolescence. Post-secondary education. What's going to happen? Is the kid going to go to school after high school? Or go into vocational training? But if there's vocational training, what kind of training? What can a child who's got sensory impairments do as an adult? Integrated or supported employment. In other words, are they going to be in a shelter where an agency sends them out to pick up trash or sends them someplace to put bricks together on a wall, but something that they can do, but under the supervision of somebody. And so we can see them in Mount Pleasant from time to time. as a group, cleaning, usually cleaning something. So there's that option. School connection, social connection and community participation. So your kid becomes an adult. So what role do they take within your community? What roles are open to them? Are they allowed to join municipal committees, right? It's okay for them to go shopping when they're not very good at it. Independent or supported living. Where can your child live? Or are they going to stay with you? And what happens if they stay with you? Someday, you won't be able to take care of them. And then what happens? I mean, for right now, sure, I can take care of them. It'll be just fine, no problem. Well, it's becoming a problem for me. I actually realize I don't know anymore how to take care of Jacob. Jacob lives in the house next door to us with 24/7 caregivers who we get to hire, but it's paid by the government. So that works. And when we pass on, that program should still be running, and he should be okay. We worry a lot about it. But it's something to think about, right? Who steps in? Adult services. It was hard enough for us to find child services. It's not like there's a book out there that said, for this problem, here are the services, and for this problem, here are the services. We had to kind of find them here and there. And, I remember Nancy was sitting next to somebody at gymnastics for one of our other children and had Jacob with her, and someone said, do you know about this service in town? No, I didn't. So that's how we learn stuff. But now you move into the world of adult services. They're no longer free for the most part because the schools aren't paying for them anymore. And so how do you get physical therapy? How do you get occupational therapy? If you can get any of that stuff at all. And then continuing adult education. Our kids' learning is not over at the end of high school. Whatever setting you can find for them for continued learning, those programs need to be out there because I know at 33, Jacob is developing new skills. He's learning new signs, has more independence. And I suspect that will continue for the rest of his life. But that has to be supported in some way. So lots of issues as our kids grow up. This is from a young adult I know who has charge syndrome. She's about Jacob's age. I think she's 31, 32. And she said to me, Tim, I would just like to be able to live by myself, to have friends and a social life, and to have a job. Well, isn't that what everybody wants? This is not weird stuff, right? But you have charge syndrome, and you look strange, and you talk strange, right? And you don't see that well. So how can you possibly live by yourself? Highly intelligent. She went to college. How can you expect anybody to want to be friends with you? And she's had a series of jobs where she got fired for each one of them because we thought you'd be able to do this job, but you clearly can't. She said, well, I have charge syndrome. I told you when you hired me. One job was to bag groceries, right? After checked out, put them in bags. She was too slow. They fired her. These are not high expectations. We want a quality of life. And there's a picture of Chip in America. Thank you. There's a picture of Chip in America. They've been engaged for about 5 years. Chip is on Facebook every day, I think, sometimes very compulsively. One of my former doctoral students and I have been trying to help him with his obsessive compulsive behaviors. Nothing has worked. That's because we're so horrible at helping him, maybe. But they love each other, right? But they live in different cities. They get to see each other once in a while. But why not? I mean, quality of life involves love in some form. I mean, it can be love of children, love of friends, love of a partner, love of family. But we all need to experience love for a quality life. Friendship, we all want friends. We all want to work. I mean, it's kind of part of our social training and learning as social critters. As animals, humans, we want to contribute. We contribute through the work that we do. Health, sleep, anxiety. Those are all problems in charge, aren't they? Housing, transportation, service availability. Again, problems that get in the way of a quality life. So who's going to step up and help work through these issues so that our children can have a quality of life? It's us as parents. There's no city council person who's going to do that for you, right? It's going to be us. So making decisions. Yes, thank you. Making decisions. And even simple ones. So Jacob was in the emergency room. It's within the past year, I think. And it turned out there was nothing very serious going on that day. But then they wanted to give him some Tylenol, painkiller. And so the nurse said, would you like to have pills or would you like to have liquid? Okay. Simple decision, right? And Jacob can do either one, but for the pills it has to be in something like applesauce. And I was sitting there thinking, well, we don't have any applesauce with us in the emergency room, so I think probably liquid would be better. All right, so then it was, well, do you want it in a syringe? We can syringe it into his mouth, or would he drink from a cup? I said, well, he's done both of those, but typically he's pretty good with the cup, but right now he's a little annoyed from being in the emergency room, so maybe he would do better with a syringe. On the other hand, if we use a syringe, he might just spit it all out anyway. Let's go with the cup. So we did the cup. I mean, simple decisions, but I thought about it while I was doing that. This is interesting. I'm struggling about these little decisions to try to choose the best way to medicate my son. What about the big decisions in life? So here's a study that was a thesis for my student Rachel Malta, who's going to be in the picture in just a second. There she is. That's at I think it's an Australasian Charge Conference. And the study, Kim is also an author on the study. She was a consultant for it, and she's on the paper that will be submitted very soon when I find 2 hours to submit it. But I thought, and actually I think, Kim, it was your idea to begin with, parental decision-making and the removal of gastrostomy tubes or buttons. It's usually an easier decision to get the button. I mean, it was hard emotionally for us, but we were pretty sure he would die if we didn't do it. So, all right, let's go ahead and put the button in. But when is the time to take it out? As soon as you turn 18, it's time to take it out. Along with every other tube. Yeah. So how does a parent come to that decision? I mean, most of you are very familiar with these things. And there's lots of reasons to want to get them out. I mean, look at all the granulation tissue around that one. You know, these tubes get kind of messy and painful, I think. I know they were an annoyance for Jacob. And what we did know, we did have it taken out, that it was attached to his liver, I think. And so it had to be kind of separated apart. Because as he had grown, it had stretched on the inside and was, so I'm glad we got it out. But, you know, when you ask the doctor, what do you think they said? Oh, no. You know, we know he's now eating, as long as it's pureed or blended, he's eating by mouth. But you never know, so best to keep it in there just in case. All right? I mean, that was the advice we kept getting as we looked to taking it out. And I'll just tell our story first. So Nancy, my wife, who's the medical person, right? She makes the medical decisions. And she was getting more and more annoyed by this. And our friend George Williams, who's a pediatrician in Sydney, Australia, who's the medical expert on charge in Australia and New Zealand, was visiting us in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And he said, let's just take it out. So we just took it out. And then the doctor said, where's his tube? And we said, oh, it fell out. We didn't notice. So it was too long to get it put back in. So we think we're just going to try it for now. Oh, okay. So basically it was against medical advice. But who's in charge? We are in charge, not some medical doctor, as nice a man as he was not the guy in charge. It's us. And we did actually have George there to support us, which was really emotionally very helpful. He didn't have to do much. I mean, the thing just slid out, right? As soon as you took the bubble out of it, it was not a problem. The problem was that it did leak. And so after about 2 or 3 months, we had to have it surgically closed. Should have done that sooner, but again, to get the doctors to respond was not easy. So one of the things we asked in this study is, what sources do parents consult when deciding to remove the G-tube or button? And this is professional sources that they consult. So pediatrician was the most common one, which makes a great deal of sense. It doesn't mean the pediatrician was the most supportive of the process, but probably the person consulted the most. Then the gastroenterologist, the GI specialist, so does all the gastro stuff. Speech-language pathologist, because they deal with swallowing, right? At least in our country, that's who you see for swallowing issues, is a speech-language pathologist. Nutritionist, which is a really good idea. Can he get all the nutrition that he needs by mouth? Surgeons, ear, nose, throat specialist. The occupational therapist, I'm not sure why, but if it's a sympathetic professional, a good person to talk to. Nurse. Professionals with knowledge of charge syndrome. I thought they would start with that one. Let's reach out to Kim or to Connie or, for heaven's sake, to me or David or Nancy. I mean, but some did, but not many. Physical therapist, general practitioner, psychologist, only one person, wisely or unwisely, social worker and teacher. So whoever was available, I suspect. These are the people who, the non-professionals they consulted. So 20 of them indicated their own child, which is really great. We couldn't do that with Jacob because he's non-vocal and really unable to tell us what his preferences are. So we have to kind of think of him for ourselves. And if we turn the slide, it'll be much easier for people to follow you, Tim. So ask a kid if you're able to. Do you want that thing anymore? Right? Now, that suggests that they're able to eat and drink by mouth, because without that, they probably should keep it. Other family members, we do rely on our families. We don't always follow their advice, and that's really probably a good idea not to always follow their advice, because what do they know? But they will weigh in. Other parents of children with charge syndrome. And that's the brilliance of like Facebook, because you can ask other parents what they think. Of course, the downside of that is there are many parents on Facebook who don't give very give advice from my perspective, but so you have to try to weigh it in terms of just feedback to you, information, as opposed to follow whatever people say. Most of it's good, but not always. Some people went to the internet, which we now can do, and look up G-tube websites, and what do they say? Books on G-tubes. I did not know there were books on G-tubes, and then blogs about the topic. So seeking out information, and there are fewer people doing those ones at the bottom, but we do need to ask people what they think and ask people what their experience has been. You can ask me about my experience with Jacob, and I'll share that, but it doesn't mean it's everybody's experience. You're the one that's in charge. You have to face up and make that decision finally. No one will do that for you. So does social media play a large role in the decision? And we asked what percentage of parents use social media to gather advice or opinions. And Facebook was used most frequently. Now we look at some of these, you have to remember that some people took out their G-tube who were responding to the survey many years ago. So that's why you see like MySpace, Google+, which aren't around so much, but Twitter weren't as used as much as Facebook. Others included the old charged listserv. For those of you who have not been around forever, before Facebook, there was a listserv, so an email would go out to everybody on the listserv if you posted to it. And some people hadn't used no traditional social media at the time of removal. There was just very few. Okay. I knew this would be a problem, but I have to see the English because I won't be able to tell you what I said if it's just in the German. So, I suspect if it was just parents from now forward, Facebook would appear much more frequently as a source of information, but I don't know. We had some open-ended questions. What additional support would have helped in making this decision? So 6 reported a connection with others in comparable situations was important to them. Again, a reason for coming to conferences. Because there's a chance to find people whose kid is somewhat similar to yours and find out what they're doing and what they're thinking and share those ideas. And then also you have people that you can email later and maybe I'll join in on Facebook with. But for most of the problems in their life, talking to somebody going through a similar experience is extremely helpful. It's just with charge, it can be hard to find those people because it's not that common. 2 reported it would be helpful to consult different sources to ensure they had all the information. And that's really important. So you get one answer on Facebook, but maybe you need to talk to somebody else as well and see if these are matching up. 2 reported it was important to trust that they knew their child best and look at what their child was ready for or needed. Who's in charge? So trust yourself. If you really feel this is a time to make this particular decision, it probably is. And it's not a life or death decision either, so that's something to keep in mind. 6 reported step-by-step explicit instructions on post-tube removal and stoma closure would have been helpful. You know, and if you go against medical advice like we did, they don't give you that information, right? They're a little annoyed with us. But it'd be nice to know these are the things you do. Yeah, it's an idea, Kim. We need a book on stoma removal and when it's time. Or a video. YouTube video. You see, we're with it. YouTube videos. Website. 7 participants noted medical professionals could have given better guidance and follow up with parental concerns. And that's actually a lot out of the 23 to specifically say that. I mean, these are open-ended. We didn't prompt the answers. At any time, did you feel your ability to make decisions for your child was compromised by the situation, by people, by opinions? And 11 indicated, did I do this? No. Okay. 11 indicated they had experienced diminished autonomy during the process. Someone was taking away your authority. Probably the medical people. 5 noted pushback from medical professionals and nurses regarding concerns that the stoma was not closing. Yeah, we did hear that. It will close on its own, just give it more time. The stuff coming out of that stoma is not nice stuff. You don't want it just taking forever to close. Anecdotes regarding alternative timelines imposed or suggested, or service decisions without parent input. So, making those decisions, having, well, it worked this long for this person, that long for that person, but you need parental input at every stage of the process. If you are a parent looking to make this decision, what would be helpful to you to feel supported and encouraged in this decision? Well, medical professional support was the biggie. If I just had support from my pediatrician or other medical provider. Information from different sources for informed decisions. Connection with others in similar situations. I mean, that would be so nice, wouldn't it, if you said, well, there's this other family, and we could connect you with them because they've been going through exactly the same thing. And then self-confidence in the parental knowledge of their child. You're in charge, but your self-confidence gets compromised all the time by the information you're given by professionals, which always suggests you don't know that much. I mean, it just does. Not for the best professionals, but many professionals don't have the wisdom to recognize it's up to the parents to make this work. So some conclusions from this study. The process to remove was not usually a sudden one. We didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, let's remove that tube. It reflected a number of steps to ensure the child had a safe swallow and would be able to handle complete oral feeding. There's an intervention, I don't know if it's really the best intervention, but they do electrical stimulation of the muscles in the throat to help to improve the swallow, developed by a woman named Marcy Freed, and it was experimental at the time we moved Jacobs, but Nancy went and spent a week in Cleveland, Ohio, which is a good distance from us, to go through Marcy Freed's program. And at the beginning of it had an unsafe swallow, at the end had a safe swallow. So we've had some confidence that he could manage this. And then open communication and understanding. Oh my goodness. The second one is open communication and understanding of parents' perspective is needed for a smooth transition and process. So even if you think parents are being too crazy to go ahead and do this, open communication, understanding of their perspective will help the transition and process. The participants reported this was not always their experience. Other major decisions. I actually asked the Facebook group, I do this from time to time, say, what are the big decisions you've had to make? And this was the list that I got. Whether to get a cochlear implant, what kind of school to attend, choosing a communication system, using growth hormone, using psychotropic medication for behavior, using other meds for different things, and whether or not to go ahead with a particular surgery. So I want to look at these because I think they're common experiences that we have, and how do we decide? But again, it is up to us. I mean, with a cochlear implantation, you know, when Jacob was little, and we heard about cochlear implants, of course we wanted one for him, but they said, no. We're only doing it with children who are pretty much typically developing except for their deafness and have had language before they became deaf. So we're not eligible. When we asked again when he was 13, because we knew people were getting them who had Charge syndrome, they said, oh, he's too old. And we said, no, he's not. And we went to one of the leading places in the Midwest for cochlear implants, and Dr. Tellian there had done them on kids with Charge. And the team met to discuss our case, and they decided to go ahead with Jacob because they felt they had motivated parents, and it'd be interesting to see how it worked on someone who was older than the typical age of 12, which was the upper age at that time at least. We met with Dr. Tellian, and he said, well, you know, this is major surgery. Yes, sir, we know that. Well, this is not going to allow him to speak. Said, we understand he will not be able to speak because of getting the implant. A really good outcome would be maybe he would recognize his name. That would be fantastic, right? Our expectations were not way up there. We were really realistic going into it. We know that kids with Charge can lose their retinas and be completely blind. We wanted something for him to have should that happen, right? Environmental sounds. Okay, at least some way to be in touch with the world. And that was our issue. Now, the anatomical issues, will the nerve be able to be fired is the real question. With Charge, the middle ear has all sorts of weird kinds of shapes going on in there. We decided the one side of his one ear could be implanted, the other one probably not. I missed them up here. That might be helpful. Cultural issues, you know, the deaf culture does not like cochlear implants by and large because it implies there's something wrong with being deaf. When we moved to Mount Pleasant, we were encouraged by somebody we met someplace. There's a deaf support group for parents of kids who are deaf. There's a support group. You should join that. So we joined that. I mean, he wasn't just deaf, obviously, but there wasn't a deaf-blind support group. But you know what? These parents were moaning and groaning about their child being deaf. And I thought, come on, if my child was just deaf, that would be a cakewalk, as we would say. So easy to just have a deaf child. Now, I realize it's not easy, but so much easier than what we go through. So, yeah, I didn't want Jacob to have to be a part of the deaf culture when he's deaf-blind and non-vocal. I don't think it was going to help him very much. But that's an issue, right? And then predicting outcomes. Well, I've told you what Dr. Tellian told us. Who knows what the outcome is going to be? I do think he responds to his name. I really do. I think he responds to the word bus as well. Because in the vocal training we had to do afterwards, it's supposed to do a sing-song kind of thing with a particular word, and ours was bus. And every morning when I would take him out for the school bus to come, I would go, ba, ba, bus, here comes the bus, ba, ba, bus, here comes the bus. So I think he got bus. I did. I figured that one out. Okay, choosing a school. What's available? This is being recorded, isn't it? Some states' schools for the deaf, who might have a deaf-blind program, I don't think are very high quality. And the one that's nearest to us, I won't mention the state, but you know where I'm from, is pretty awful. I think you get an inferior education, even though there are many parents who choose it because, well, these people all know how to work with somebody who's deaf and deaf-blind. I don't see it. I don't see the specialized training. I just think they're teachers who wanted to work with the deaf, and that's fine. I don't see a big difference. I consult with a school for the deaf, has a deaf-blind program, and they have quite a few children with charge, and I've consulted with them for several years now. It's in a different state than mine. I think they do a really good job. And so I'm supportive of them and their programs, but I'm not convinced that it's necessarily better than what a kid could get in their neighborhood school. But I know neighborhood schools who I'd never allow a child who's got disabilities to attend because the services are terrible. So I love the idea of a neighborhood school, and Jacob always went to his neighborhood school. And I think we did okay, but one reason I think we did okay is because Nancy, my wife, trained the school in terms of how to work with Jacob. And without her meeting with them monthly and providing them with support and information and suggestions for training they could get, and the willingness of his team to get extra training, which was really helpful, it made it work. I've known people who neighborhood schools said no. The school for the deaf said no. There was a school the kid has to go for an hour every day on the bus where they have an interpreter. I don't think the program is very great, but that was the only one that would take him. And then, of course, special education classroom, they're not all made equally. It depends on the expertise and training of the teacher and how many teachers have expertise in deafblindness. And you know, even though in the US, every state has a deafblind project, and that person consults with the schools and provides them with training, we train the teachers, and then what happens is a year later they move to a different school and you got to start all over again. So it's hard to get that information out there. And I don't always know the special education classrooms know more about what the child needs than the parents do. But how often do they listen to the parents? Inclusion or mainstream. So Jacob was fully included from kindergarten. Well, Nancy and I will disagree on terminology here, but I would say 7th grade. Only because we insisted on it. I mean, we arrive at the kindergarten before school starts, and we say, of course, our child who's spinning on the floor over here is going to be fully included. And they go, what? Yes, because this is best practice now. So there was a meeting, and it was a superintendent, principal, special education administrator, special education teacher, probably someone from the teacher union. I don't remember. There was this room crowded with people. And we're sitting there thinking, yeah, inclusion is the way to go. But we were able to get a deafblind specialist from, I don't know, she's brought to the state by the former Deafblind Project. I think she's from Pennsylvania or something like that. And she was there, and she started advocating that this would be really good for Jacob. So we convinced them. But every year they asked us, going to do this again? And we said, yes, of course. I'll never forget, 3rd grade going into 4th grade, and the principal said, now, do you want to do inclusion again next year? And we said, well, yes, of course. Well, do you know that there are no 4th grade teachers that want him? Oh. And we need to think about what's best for Jacob. And I wanted to say, I don't give a shit about what's best for Jacob. I just want to preserve my own naive fantasies about him. I didn't say that. But Nancy went home in tears. You know, the lack of sensitivity, the lack of empowering parents. See, it's not our job to make inclusion work. It's your job to make inclusion work. It's our job to choose it. And we did choose it. And the wonderful thing about it, they have a consultation. They don't hate me. They just have a consultation. The wonderful thing about it was that 4th grade teacher was the best teacher he had. She was an experienced teacher. She rolled up her sleeves. She said, we're going to make this work. She got an overstuffed chair to put in the middle of the classroom. That's where Jacob's going to sit. And every time I saw her, she said, let me tell you about what Jacob did the other day. It was great. It was great. What you really want is a teacher who's interested and cares about your child. And the rest can just take place. But you don't have that. It doesn't work at all. It got harder to do inclusion. 7th grade, we got a call before school started. Well, of course, Nancy got the call because I wouldn't take it. From a teacher. She was a home economics teacher. I don't know if that translates, but she taught cooking, sewing, that kind of stuff. But her class is mostly cooking. And she said, I hear your son's going to be in my class. I don't know if that's appropriate. You know, I teach cooking, and it's a serious class. They have to be able to do things. And Nancy tried to explain that there's a way to let Jacob do some of the activities in the classroom. If they're pouring flour into a measuring cup, can Jacob pour flour into a measuring cup? So he's participating in some way, right? Well, she didn't get that. She just didn't get it. But Jacob went to her class nevertheless. I think it was a special education teacher, because Jacob then, for the first time, spent part of his day in special education, part of the day in regular classrooms, who explained again to that teacher, you don't have to be responsible. He's got a support aide, right, who will help him do what he needs to do in the classroom. So he's participating in his own way. She said, oh, really? I didn't understand that. And she relaxed. And she's one of these teachers who'd been there for probably 50 years or more. A really good teacher and a very powerful person within the school. So when she understood what this was all about, she loved it. She said, her class is 12 weeks. Can I have Jacob for 12 more weeks? And then, Nancy, would you come to the school and do a presentation for all the teachers on inclusion? So we made it work, thanks to my wife, really, who knows how to make these things work. And maybe today, well, actually, kids have been included since Jacob. He was the first severe disabilities to be included. There have been many more since then. We kind of paved the way there. But again, we were making the decision. You can't make the decision for us. You make it work for us. Homeschooling has become very popular for many parents. If the school can't do it, I'll do it. That's a lot of work, and it doesn't help with the socialization. Because one benefit of inclusion for Jacob was he was with regular kids. And we formed a circle of friends so that those kids who were most interested in Jacob were formalized in terms of his circle. They would meet on a regular basis to talk about how to support Jacob at school, talk about what to do for his birthday or an outdoor activity they might do with Jacob. So they were planning, and it was the point, I think, when they were going into 6th grade, a girl was running for 6th grade president, right? And she had on her advertisement thing, first thing, member of Jacob's circle of friends. And by 7th grade, all the cool kids were members. I don't think they cared about Jacob particularly, frankly, but they wanted to be part of his circle because this is what the cool kids did. So he wouldn't have had that with homeschooling. But nevertheless, with homeschooling, you don't have to worry about those people out there telling you what you can and can't do. You organize it. You carry it forth. So lots of decisions for parents to make around schooling, and none of these are easy. I've sat with many parents over the years trying to help them make a decision as to what to do. And, if you could wave a magic wand and make whatever you wanted for your child work, we'd do one thing. But when we look at the reality of the schools that are available, programs, teachers, availability of resources, we have to make the best decision that we can. Communication system. This is an interesting one. I don't know if it's getting better or not out there. But there's American Sign Language, like this German Sign Language. So should that be the communication system that we use with our child? Or there's, for us, Signing Exact English. Do you have Signing Exact German? Yeah. And the advantage of Signing Exact German or English is that they're learning the signs in a typical sentence structure in our language. And they're not the same in our languages at all. But the advantage of that one is it's easier to teach the kids to read if they've had Signing Exact German. But the disadvantage is they don't have their own language, or a language where they can communicate with other people who are deaf. So maybe ASL is superior to Signing Exact English, and it depends on who you talk to. There are teachers, the deaf, who strongly advocate one or strongly advocate the other one. The oral, this is teaching the kid to speak, and you can help them to shape their lips and make sounds, and you've probably heard people who are deaf speak, and it's a little bit off, but not bad. And there's some schools who insist they're going to do an oral approach. And other schools who say, no, we don't do oral approach at all. We just do American Sign Language. Which is the right way? I don't know. Using pictures in the picture exchange system was the best communication tool we ever found for Jacob. He gets it. He doesn't always use it because he doesn't have to anymore, right? It used to be in the old days if you wanted chocolate pudding, get the sign, put it on the sign strip, hand it to his caregiver, get him the chocolate. Today, he walks in the refrigerator, opens it up, and gets his own chocolate pudding. I mean, he can bypass these steps. But we thought that was a wonderful, wonderful system. Some people think, no, you should work harder on sign language because there are not always going to be pictures around. Actually, if you carry them with you, they will be. And there's the idea of the whole language approach. And the whole language approach means you use all of this, right? And see what works. Have a rich communicative environment for the child. And some people say, no, they'll never learn a system in that case. You're doing a huge disadvantage. You should stick with one so they at least have a single language. Now, I'll tell you, I'm an American Sign Language, picture exchange, whole language guy. All right? That's what I wanted for my child. Was that the right choice? I don't know. There's no control group. I don't have Jacob over here who didn't get those things to see which was better. So that's the problem for us as parents. We're making these decisions, and these decisions have consequences. But we have to make them. We have to be the one to tell the school, no, we've researched this. We've talked to those professionals. We've talked to those non-professionals. And we have come to the conclusion that for our child, this is what we want. Now you make it work, right? I mean, I think it's the only way to do it. Growth hormone. This is kind of a fun one. And was Jeremy Kirk here one time? Wasn't he? Yeah. So Jeremy Kirk, if you've heard him before, he's a pediatric endocrinologist from Birmingham, England. The most expert endocrinologist on charge. Every time I hear Jeremy, I learn something different, which seems to contradict what I learned before. But that's probably because the field keeps changing and understanding keeps changing. But I remember him saying one time that because growth hormones are so expensive and probably in charge have a very little effect, you do better to have your child stand on a bunch of money to get the same degree of height than to spend it all. But that's not always true, so it is tough. Small stature is a feature of the syndrome. Not when Christians are around, right? Some people, grow quite tall. It happens, but it is a feature of the syndrome. Are they actually growth hormone deficient? And I sent some lab results to Jeremy, and he said, I don't think these people are growth hormone deficient, but they're on growth hormone treatments anyway. I think some parents mix up growth hormones with sex hormones. Sex hormones are your testosterone and your estrogen, and probably you want your kid to get some help with that. Very few kids with charge don't need help going through puberty. And also growth hormone shots, I'm told, are very painful. I don't know if that's true, but who likes pain? And if you get results, say, we did growth hormone and my child grew an inch. We don't know if that's because of the growth hormone you added to their system or because they were going to grow an inch. It's very hard to know. And I'm not here saying you shouldn't use growth hormone treatment. I would never say that because sometimes I think it's been effective with some kids with charge. But I wouldn't just do it because it worked for this other family. You have to evaluate the evidence, talk to people, talk to professionals who might have some understanding. Email Jeremy Kirk, because he's pretty good about responding to emails from parents. Not always from me, but usually from parents. Not usually with me, too. Or find a good endocrinologist that you trust. But again, it's going to be your decision. Also ask yourself, if my child didn't get any taller, would that be bad? I don't know. I have an adopted son from Guatemala who's, I think he'll say he's 5'4", but that's when his hair is really tall. He's short. His wife is a little bit taller than he is. He's quite happy. All right, psychotropic medication. Some kids with charge have behavioral issues. I'm going to do this. There are many reasons for behavioral issues. And I've broken it down into three that I think are major issues for behavior. One is pain. Pain gets overlooked in charge all the time. And our kid might go to the doctor and not show any symptoms of anything. That does not mean they're not in pain, especially from the gastrointestinal system. Bloating, constipation. We just don't move through stuff doesn't move through the body with kids with charge as it does for other people. And Kim can talk about that stuff in some detail. But there's lots of pain. And when you're in pain, what's the quality of your behavior? Do you ever snap at other people when you're in pain? Do you ever get angry? Do you behave in bizarre ways? Then the sensory issues. Trying to figure out how to navigate a world that doesn't always make sense to me can lead to some interesting behavioral stuff. And also just the processing of the different sensory channels in the brain gets out of whack, doesn't work well when there's diminished ability in the different sensory systems. And then anxiety. Do you think our kids ever get anxious? Well, if you lived in a world where things were hard to predict, You never knew exactly what was happening or why it was happening. You were very happily lying on your bed having a nice nap, and someone comes by and gets you up and sticks you in the car, and the car takes off. Would that make you anxious? Where are we going? Am I going to another hospitalization where they're going to hurt me? Am I going to the grocery store? Am I going 10 hours to grandma's house? What is going on? So, lots of reasons for behavior, but most of the time, from my perspective, behavior is a solution the kid has found for a problem that they're experiencing. Think about that one. But nevertheless, many children with charge get psychotropic medication to help with their behavior. So what's the evidence for its effectiveness? It's not really great. Partly because we don't really know how well it works on children anyway. Most psychotropics are tested on adults and not on children. And very few are tested on children with charge syndrome. What I hear from parents is often there's a delayed effect, then there is an effect, but within 6 weeks it may be fading and doesn't seem to work anymore, in which case the psychiatrist or other physician will prescribe on top of the first one, a second one, and sometimes a third one. And I talked to some people at a charge conference who were working with a client, an adult client, who was on 12 of them. And I said, well, then she must be like a zombie. And they said, no, you can't control her behavior. So they probably want to add a 13th and 14th. But I talked to people where she had been in school before. Said, when she graduated from high school, she was calm, she was fine. You know, when our kids get into adult services which are bad, they don't like, not accommodating to them, you'll find they'll develop behaviors. And that behavior is telling you, this is not working, right? Something needs to change. But if you don't listen to that behavior, then what happens? Well, we'll drug it out of them. And then we no longer have that ability to read their behavior as communication. They're communicating to you by their behavior that something is off. And when you ignore that, or take away that option, the behavior gets worse. So we're limited by the lack of evidence. I get these emails. I honestly do from psychologists and physicians saying, what are the best psychotropics to use with kids with charge? And my answer is, why do you want to prescribe psychotropics? I don't usually hear back from them after that. But the knowledge of the prescriber, how knowledgeable are they about behavior in charge specifically, and the different psychotropics? And then what are the alternatives out there? And unfortunately, there are not lots of alternatives made available to parents. You know, what do you do? I mean, your child's behavior is horrible. You can't take them anywhere, right? And you go, I need some help with this behavior. You go to the doctor says, let me prescribe something. It's a very natural thing then to choose to do what the doctor says. So we need to do a better job, people like me, educating the world of professionals out there that we don't start with medication. We start with saying, I wonder why the child chose that behavior. Do you ever wonder why your child chooses to hang upside down, right? It solves a lot of problems for the child at that moment when they're hanging upside down. Their head is stable. They can see straight forward. They have good balance, good proprioceptive feedback. It works for them and gives them a chance to kind of cool off from the rest of their day. But I've known so many schools that said, we have to stop that child from hanging upside down. Why? Other medications to think about, sleep medications. I'm not a big fan of medication. I think our kids get over-medicated. And sometimes they wanted to medicate Jacob for sleep when it turned out he had a embedded, infected thing in his inner ear, his ear passage that was rubbing against his eardrum. And so causing him inability to sleep because he was lying down, it really rubbed against his eardrum. But they wanted to prescribe sleep medication because then he could sleep. But no, something's going on. They finally found what was wrong. They didn't know it was wrong, but kept insisting, there's something wrong. There are alternatives to sleep medications. Positive bedtime routines. There's stuff you can read about in the literature. Secretions. Medicate for secretions. We can do Botox injections. You talked to Kim about that one. Anesthesia. Kim and I did a paper on complications in anesthesia with charge syndrome. I try to give it to anesthesiologists before Jacob has surgery. They don't want to look at it. Say, no, it's fine. But it is concerning because of the possibility of not being able to breathe. Certainly is one of the concerns. Allergy medications, I mean, sometimes those are necessary, but sometimes they might depress. They can make you sleepy, right? And it's just general concern with interactions and complications. Who is the person who takes the information from the heart doctor and the throat doctor and the sleep doctor and integrates it all and makes sure that everything is being coordinated? It's us as parents, and we're not equipped to do that. But we have to. There's nobody else who's out there doing that. Because there can be interactions. Now, hopefully, their physicians are paying attention to everything that your child is taking and looking for it. But with charge, you just never know. Whether to have surgery. You know, Nolan, who you saw in the picture, and is our friend, he has to have one more surgery for his cleft palate, and his mom keeps postponing it. It's not essential surgery, but probably would help him. But she's scared to have him go through it again. Autoplasty, some people like to rearrange the outer ears. I think charge ears are cute, but not everybody in the world seems to think that. So they're wrong, I'm right. But you can get surgery to correct that. Heart surgery, probably pretty critical for a lot of our kids who have severe heart problems, but not one anybody wants to face. The G-tube. Jacob's had some bowel obstructions, so his bowel just gets a kink in it and nothing will go through. And they're saying maybe he should get a G-tube. I'm going, no, I don't want to go back to the G-tube. So we're only talking to physicians who say, we don't think you need to. The rest we're not paying any attention to. Lots of elective surgeries. Oh, back surgery, scoliosis, that was mentioned by parents quite a bit, is one that they struggle with. I mean, Jacob is hunched over, but right now he's pliable enough, they say we don't need to do it. I don't know. There is another decision to be made. I can decide I'm inadequate to the task of raising a child with charge syndrome and should just give up. And I've known parents who have given up. Or I can decide to rise to the challenge and create something good from all of this. I know lots of parents who have done that. But it's a choice that we have. You're in charge. As hard as it is to have to make these decisions for our children, it's up to us. So do you have it? Do you have it within yourself to do that? Or you can give up and hope someone else will take over. But that doesn't usually go very well. So, of course, we just want my child to be normal. I signed up for normal children. Right? Please, all my children are supposed to be normal. Okay, think about this. Who do you know in your entire life who's normal? Only you. Right? Nah. I'm not going to go through this now because I'm going to go through it tomorrow. But I love the idea that the skills we need to raise our child are the skills we need for a marathon, because this is not a sprint. Maybe it was with other children. Sometimes it seems like those 18 years went by really fast. But with Jacob, it's the rest of our life. So if we sprint really hard, we're going to collapse and not be able to carry on. So think about what you need to be able to do to get through the marathon. You know, when you run a marathon, you got little drinking stations and all sorts of stuff along the way to help you recoup and keep going. So that's what we want to think about. That's Jacob in ICU after he was born, and my son Nathan being very careful to touch him. My oldest son would not touch him. He was too scared. Going into the NICU, you have to put stuff on your hands to, get rid of anything germs might be on your hands. My oldest son wanted to do the same thing when he left. He was afraid he might have caught something. Kids are different in their reactions. Obviously, feel free to contact me anytime. However, that phone number doesn't work. I retired, and it's no longer my phone number. They took my phone out. You're retired, Tim. Do you need a phone? I guess not. I knew I would do this, use up my whole time, but thank you. I hope you have the courage to be in charge, because you are.
Ja, ich bin an. Vielen Dank, Tim. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, thank you.
Wir würden gerne jetzt, wir sind genau in der Zeit.
Actually, we're exactly on time, and we'd like to take a 30-minute break at this point, and then we'll hear Nancy. So we'll continue at 4:30.